Shana Tova. As we move from the stillness of summer to the growth and change of fall, a new season, a new school year, a new Jewish year, new goals, plans, hopes, it's time to jump in again. I already see some nodding to that. It's time to jump in. It's time to fight inertia and move, even if we feel stuck or unmotivated or afraid. When I feel stuck or unmotivated or afraid, I remember the time I was stung by a jellyfish. It was Rehoboth Beach in the summertime, and I was standing on the edge of the water, struggling with a long, lingering fear of the ocean. I wanted to jump in so badly, but I was hesitating. Lots of feelings, fear and anxiety among them, stuck me to that shore. I've always been a little bit or a lot afraid of the ocean, the wide open ocean. I jokingly blame my parents for allowing me to watch the movie Jaws at too young an age. As a kid, that soundtrack played in my head, even in swimming pools. You know the one? Who can do it? Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. Yes! Extra credit to those who finished the line. But I have always also loved the ocean. Cautiously, but loved the ocean, and I have, as I've grown older, mostly overcome my fear of mechanical sharks. Sometime, on a good day. So that summer afternoon, I was truly torn. The winds had picked up and the crowds had thinned some, so I was alone approaching the edge of the water. And before me was the most peaceful, quiet, clear, gorgeous ocean. I finally jumped into the expanse, felt the shock of the cold, and I felt simultaneously calm and energized, a little scared too, alive, very alive and happy. No sharks in sight. I prayed. Most of my prayers will stay here, but I'll share one with all of you. I prayed that by taking a risk and going in, despite being also stuck and also afraid, that God and the universe would hold me and would keep me safe. It turns out around the same time I was praying for my safety, I was also being stung by a jellyfish. That was quite a message, God. Thank you for that. That was really good timing. But really thank you because it was mild and somewhat of a delayed reaction. Of course, I wish I could have had the perfect moment, the idyllic, peaceful experience of jumping into the ocean without the forthcoming sting. But that jellyfish also reminded me in, shall we say, a memorable way, that when I feel stuck or scared, I need to do the work to accept that there will always be good and bad together. They go hand in hand, or they take turns, or they are mixed up as one. We take our fear and our faith, and we try to jump in anyway. In this season, as we are shifting our energy, we're shifting our focus towards family or community or professional achievement or learning or activism or caregiving, our work, as we jump into our passions and our commitments. As we work on relationships, nurturing those we love, making amends, maybe also meeting new people. We jump into connection. And for some of us, our most important work in this season will be internal. We will be finding peace, we'll be finding rest, we'll be finding meaning, joy, jumping into, you could say, jumping into our own growth. And all this jumping is exciting and scary. There are jellyfish and there are real sharks. So I submit to you that this is also a season to brave our fears and to move forward anyway in the ways that we can. Is jumping in the same as taking that proverbial leap of faith? So maybe, maybe not. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel taught in his great philosophical work, God in Search of Man, in response to that question of, is this a leap of faith? He taught, a Jew is asked to take a leap of action rather than a leap of faith. What is a leap of action? He goes on to explain, I'm paraphrasing, that at first we must do even more than we can understand, trusting that later our understanding will catch up to our actions. He says, right living is a way to right thinking. Not that we should act recklessly or without thinking, but that when we have a reasonable path ahead, sometimes we need to act before we have all the information. Many of our traditional Jewish stories model this kind of bravery and belief in ourselves. Belief in ourselves, belief in each other, belief in God. These are leaps of action and faith, but leaps of action. For example, the Passover story is a different holiday, I know, but it's a familiar story that we retell all year long. Recall that the Israelites had been enslaved for hundreds of years, generations of getting accustomed to a certain way of life, an oppressive way of life. Then they witnessed the horror of the 10 plagues. And on that night of the 10th plague, on that night when the firstborn were killed, Pharaoh finally allows the Israelites to leave. And you will also remember, they don't have a lot of time. They have to flee in less time than it takes for dough to rise. They have to pack up and leave. So this night of the Exodus is and was, in history, in our mythology, itself a profound leap of action. And another comes pretty soon in the story. We learn in a midrash, in an interpretive story, that as the Israelites approach the Red Sea, the Egyptian army is chasing them from behind, and they hesitate, and they're stuck, and they're arguing amongst themselves about who is going to jump in first. They have to do something, but they can't figure out what to do. They can't figure out who's going to jump in. One tribe says, I won't be the first one. Another tribe says, I won't be the first one to jump into the sea. And then a man named Nachshon springs forward and jumps first. Only then does Moses then hold out his arm, and God, the imagery we've heard of and we've seen, God parts the waters so there's a path to walk through, a dry pathway. Still must have been terrifying, but not quite the same as jumping into the water. We remember this Exodus story, this story of taking a leap of action throughout the year, as I said. Every Friday night, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim is part of our Kiddush, our blessing over the wine, part of our liturgy on Shabbat, and every day in the morning service we sing the Song of the Sea, and there are countless other examples of recalling this leaping moment as part of our Jewish practice. We remember so intentionally and so often because our liberation story is not only about God saving them or God saving us, but also about our ancestors having the courage to save themselves. We have other stories. We talked about the leaving Egypt, jumping into the sea. We have so many other stories. Miriam saving her infant brother, Moses, Queen Esther risking her life with the volatile king, the Maccabean revolt, and the examples could go on and on. We celebrate all the times in our history when we have taken risks, and it has turned out in our favor in the end, of course, but we know that sometimes the jumps don't work out the way we'd hoped. And so we know that sometimes part of taking a risk means that the path ahead could be painful. The path ahead could be windy. That's part of the jumping. And so our rabbinic tradition teaches us that we must bless, have gratitude for, feel connected to, accept all of our human experience. The bad alongside the good. We are not supposed to thank God just for the good. We're not supposed to focus just on the good. We have a teaching in the Mishnah, which is the first code of rabbinic Jewish law. This is the teaching. We are obligated to recite a blessing for the bad that befalls us, just as we recite a blessing for the good that befalls us. And the reasoning is based on the Shema, that we love God bechol levavcha. We should love God with all of your heart, with all of our hearts, and the focus on all. This is the drash. This is the interpretive piece. The reason why we say all of your heart is because it should be with our Yetzer HaTov, with our good inclination, and our Yetzer Hara, and our bad inclination. So the very language of this central blessing, which is a verse from the Torah, a central part of our liturgy, that we should pray with all the parts of ourselves. We should see that there's both good and bad in each of us. So too, is there good and bad in the world? There's a mixture. We're made of a mixture, and there is a mixture. In the Talmud too, we have warnings that we should not pray in a way that's too lopsided. We shouldn't pray and thank God or describe God as being only good. We should also make sure to acknowledge the bad. So there are a lot of examples, and I've studied with some of you these examples in more depth. I'll just mention a couple. From the first blessings of the morning, we bless God who matir asurim, releases the bound. So the release is, of course, the good, and the fact that there are people who are bound, that we have been ourselves a people who have been enslaved without freedom in different ways. It's inherent. There's the bad side of it. Another one of those morning blessings, Hanotein layav koach, the one who gives strength to the weary. Yes, we want strength, and we also know that we have been without strength. We acknowledge in that blessing that we have been weary. We bless a God who is El Adon al Kol HaMa'asim, a God of all existence, not just the perfect and beautiful things, but everything. So if we can learn to accept the bad alongside the good, the hope is that jumping in becomes easier. If we can find encouragement in the stories of our ancestors at the times when they needed to act, the hope is that we feel less alone. And if we can learn to soothe our own fears, the hope is that we can feel less afraid. And that soothing piece, that last piece, is built into our liturgy too. The familiar Psalm 27, the one we repeat throughout the month of Elul, leading up to the holidays and throughout the holidays, includes soothing from fear, soothing ourselves. We sing, God is my light and my help. Whom shall I fear? Adonai is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I dread? One thing I ask, only that do I seek, to live in the house of Adonai all the days of my life. Be strong and of good courage. Chazak v'yametz, that we should be strong and of good courage. I hear in this psalm, and it is built into these days of awe, an intuition that we will hesitate sometimes. We will feel stuck. We will feel afraid. We will not be sure about jumping into the ocean metaphor of the new year. We know there are jellyfish, and we have been stung before. We will need, and I pray for us to have, the strength to overcome whatever is holding us back from the jumping in that we need for this new year. And I pray for the wisdom to accept the bad alongside the good, and the ability to comfort ourselves and comfort each other, to soothe all the fear and all the anxiety along the way. I wish us all a Shana Tova u'Metuka. May our new year be good and sweet.